So, not too long after I went to New Mexico, I found an African dance class. It was actually an Afro Brazilian dance class there, and I started going to that all the time, which was also waking me up and getting me in my body and getting me to feel more. And I was very obsessed with it. In fact, I think when I had my graduation for the massage school, I did an African dance performance, and the drummer for that African dance performance was a guy who was drumming for the class that I was going to. And he was a Mexican guy who was playing African drums. And while I was taking the class, I started to really bond with him. I really felt him. He was incredibly passionate, just so really earthy, and just, yeah, feeling it. A lot of feeling, a lot of feeling. And by this time, my relationship with Sean had kind of fizzled out, and I was starting to really connect with this guy in African dance class, and we did the performance for the graduation. And then he would take me on walks like down by the river. He very had this very strong Native American feel to him, which actually he is Native American because he's Mexican, and Mexicans the brown ones are Native Americans. They were here first, they didn't come from Spain. And that was most of what he was. But it wasn't even just his bloodline, it was his soul. He was very into the land, very much into land, very passionate about earth. In fact, he even told me he loved my last name Brown because it's his favorite color, earth. And he had made some really beautiful art out of driftwood and wood and all kinds of things, feathers, and he was just so nature oriented. And he would take me for these walks down by the river, the Rio Grande, and he would hold my hand, and he would just share this passion he had. I remember one time we were down there sitting on a little island in the river, and my mind was always busy. I was all up in my head about all kinds of stuff, and he was sitting there, and I said, "So what are you thinking?" And he's like, "Oh, I was just listening to the sound of that of the water flowing." And that was just so new to me. He was living in a reality I was not living in. And it really impressed me. And I started to have such strong feelings for him. And then one time we were walking down by the river holding hands, and I'm all in love. And then he tells me that he lives with a woman that he has a child with. But they're more just like roommates because, he got her pregnant, and he just wanted, they're more like brother and sister, like he's just taking care of her. And I'm still young and dumb. And I'm thinking, oh, well, they don't love each other. They'll break up, and me and him will be together. And I have to say, too, this was a really big stretch for me because in my family, brown eyes, like Joe had brown eyes, and I was really hesitant to be involved with Joe because of brown eyes. I forgot to mention that earlier. But now this guy was brown all over. And my heart was all about it. But it was definitely, I was programmed and conditioned that was wrong, and I should not be with someone of a different race. Race mixing is bad. But I decided I wasn't going to listen to that. I was going to listen to my heart. But then here he goes and lays this whole trip on me that he's with someone. But I was dumb enough to think that, oh, well, they're not feeling each other. They'll split up. And it didn't work that way. She was a very beautiful Mexican woman, very traditional. And she was devastated by what he did and when it came out. And she fought for him, and he lied to me. And just a huge nightmare came out of this. But there was also an incredible amount of beauty. Like, I tried to stay away from him when I found out that she was actually upset over this. And I did. And then something happened, and he made it seem like he was going to leave her, and he took me and we drove to. He asked me if I would go to Phoenix with him because he had to go play a show. He was a musician, and so I drove with him to Phoenix. And at nighttime, instead of going to a hotel, he pulled us over to the side of the road and pulled my hand and just dragged me up the side of this hill onto this mesa with sleeping bags and stuff, and we slept out under the stars and had the most phenomenal, I mean, you could call it sex, but that was just love and passion all wrapped in it was just mind-blowing, phenomenal, beautiful, transformational, incredible experience. But then when we came back, to New Mexico, and the reality was he wasn't ready to leave this woman. She was really, really hurt and begging him to stay, and he was really torn, and he wasn't being honest with me. And she actually came over one time and threatened violence on me, and then she brought his mother over and scared the crap out of me. She was an intense woman. And she, threw my sewing box at me, and we had all this heavy stuff go down, and I was just so shattered by it all. And at the same time, I was working at a health food store, a different health food store. It was like had a deli there, and a store. And that guy, actually, there's a whole story with that too. One time I was working for this guy, and a black guy came into the store and says, "Hey, I'm looking for something to buy that I can put on my cereal that will help with my blood sugar." And the owner's like, "Oh, you need this." And it was like some little bottle of stuff. And I knew that wasn't really what this guy was asking for, but I was just this kid, and I was kind of like, I wasn't the boss, so I didn't say anything. So he sold it to the guy, and the guy came back later that day and wanted to return it. And he was like, "Hey, this isn't what you told me it was. I want to return it." And the owner was a total jerk to him. And he was like, "Sorry, you opened it, next," and just ignored him. And the guy was like, "Hey, don't ignore me, man. I'm just trying to, I just want to return this. It's not what you told me it was." And the owner totally ignored him again. And then the owner pushes the robbery button under the counter. And the guy's like, "Okay, fine. You call the cops. I'm going to stay here because I didn't do anything. I'll wait for the cops." So he stood in the doorway waiting for the cops. Well, next thing you know, in a very short time, the cops had the place surrounded in the front, and they had guns pulled on this guy and his wife who was with him. And the wife is screaming. She's terrified. And they make them come outside before they knew what was going on. They made him come outside at gunpoint and made him lay face down on the dirty sidewalk. And the wife is still screaming. And I'm standing there in shock. And then I said to the guy, "Aren't you going to go tell them they don't have guns?" And he says very arrogantly, "Let them find out for themselves." I couldn't believe it. So I ran out there and I was like, "Hey, these people didn't do anything wrong. It's the owner. He's an asshole." And I was so furious and scared because I just told on this guy and that was my job. But I figured, well, I'm done here. I'm not going to have a job anymore. So I just walked out. I left. I wish I would have got those people's information so I could have gone to court for them and testified for them. I don't know what happened out of it. But in any case, before that happened, and I'm working at this job, and at the time I was, having this thing with Tomas go on, I had a dream a few weeks prior that I found a house for rent up in the mountains for $300 a month. And I was in the health food store working one day, and this girl that I had known from massage school comes in, and I was like, "Hey, how you doing?" She's like, "Good. I'm moving out of town. I'm moving out of my place up in the mountains." I'm like, "Oh, you live in the mountains?" She's like, "Yeah." She's like, "I have this awesome place. It's like 2 acres, 2,000 square feet up in the Jemez. It's, it's just beautiful." And I'm like, "Oh my God, how much do you pay for it?" And she's like, "Well, like $250. I was like, "Oh, wow. Can I rent it?" And she was like, "Yeah, you could rent it. They'll probably charge you $300, but you can rent it." So I went up there to look at the place and fell in love with it and started renting it. And this was at the time with the whole turmoil with Tomas, and he came out there uh, to stay with me for a while, and it was wildly, wildly, wildly passionate, incredible, beautiful, soul deep, connecting. Also, the people who moved out had a jewelry business where they had all this equipment where they could make metal jewelry with stones set into it, like earrings and stuff. And when they left it there, and they said, if you want to use it, you can. We'll teach you how to use it. So Tomas and I started living this fairy tale life of, aside from all the drama on the side, fairy tale life of making arts and crafts and having wildly passionate sex and feeling so deeply connected to Earth and feeling so loved and so like creative. All of it. It was just phenomenal. And so we started a little business making crafts and making earrings, and we started selling them at the flea markets and stuff. But also at the same time, he was feeling, he had to go back to take care of his son, and I guess the woman was still begging him to stay, and uh, for whatever reason that I may never know, he got her pregnant. And so around the same time, he got me pregnant. And so this whole nightmare came out of this. The beautiful thing about all of this was now I was learning how to feel. It was like all those horrible feelings of feeling like I was just going to be some guy's cow because of my dad being a polygamist. That was feeling like I was not going to be the one, be special, be loved, all those horrible, horrible feelings. I was living them now. And I fought with him really hard and was like, I won't be with you anymore. And then he said, okay, I will leave her. And so then we had a relationship that was equal as much heaven as it was hell. And I'm not making any justifications for what I did. I was naive. He did lie to me a lot, but I could have walked away. And one of the reasons I didn't was because of what I went through with Joe. I was like, I spent all those years feeling such intense passion and love for someone and not being able to do anything about it. I'm not going to do that again.